You guys are in for a treat. James Currier is one of the smartest fucking people in the Valley. Certainly one of the most interesting people for me to talk to. I try and plead with him to do at least one talk a year with us. He doesn't do a lot more than that, but it's always a treasure. I guess we've known each other maybe around 10 years or something like that. So we're kind of old dogs. James has been an entrepreneur. He's been a VC. He runs, you call it an accelerator?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's an NFX guild. It's a guild. It's like an accelerator.
Guild, and he actually owns nfx.com, which is, how many people own 3-letter domains in this audience? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Exactly. And before that, it was called Ooga. That was 4 letters. So like you're decreasing in letters. The next iteration will have two letters, I guess. Eventually, you'll just have to go steal x.com from Elon or PayPal. I think they own that now.
I think they own it.
All right, so we're going to do a 3-act play, I guess, or something like that. And I guess the early years, if you can kind of compress your first 25 or 30 years into 5 minutes and tell the Tickle story as well as any others.
Yeah, just so you get a context of who I am. I graduated from Princeton in 1990, worked in venture capital at Battery Ventures and GTE New Ventures in the 90s. Made the mistake of going back to business school in the late 90s. When I got out, had a choice between going back into venture or starting a company, and I couldn't sleep with this idea I had that the internet was going to be about media about us. I called it me media or snippet media. We now know it as user-generated content. And so I started a company called Tickle, which actually, from a marketing perspective, since this is Marketing Week, it's an interesting story. We called it E-mode at the beginning, and you say, well, what the heck is E-mode? And that was the problem. And I didn't know anything about naming. And subsequently, we changed the name to Tickle and got the Tickle URL, and it made a big difference to our business. So if you think that naming is important, you're right. And if you don't think it's important, then you're probably wrong. So just take that with you. If you guys are having debates among the co-founders about how important it is, whoever's saying it's important is the right person in that argument. We almost went out of business. We were 3 days away from missing payroll in 2000. And we got viral and raised $9 million from August Capital.
Wait, you got viral?
Yeah, we got viral.
How would you explain that?
Got it. So there weren't that many viral things back then, but what we did was, actually, we got lucky. Like most of you will do when you look back on your successes, you'll realize that it was just luck, and you'll tell everyone that it's not.
I don't think most of them will get lucky, actually. I think a few of them might get lucky. We'll see.
And what happened was we were trying to build self-assessment tests. We were the first people to build self-assessment tests on the web. And we made 27 really serious ones, and no one came, maybe 18,000 people a day or something. And then finally, we were running out of money, and so we said what every good entrepreneur says when they're about to do something great. I said, fuck it. And just decided to throw caution to the wind, and we said, well, let's make these tests about dogs or about babies, because my friend at an ad agency in New York said, if you want someone to remember your ad, put puppies and babies in it. So I'm like, all right, let's make a test about puppies and babies. And so we did that, and then 8 days later, we had 1 million people hitting the website because it was what we now call entertainment virality, which was, dude, you gotta check this out. Right? So if someone is saying that about your product, then we call that entertainment virality. And that only lasts for a short period, but it's really good when you get it. So then we took that bump, we raised our 9 million, we saved the company, we moved it out from Boston. I settled in here, hired my VP of engineering, Stan Chudnovsky, who has now been my business partner for 16 years. He's currently full-time at Messenger. He runs product for Facebook Messenger, and he works with the NFX Guild companies on the weekends. Poor guy.
I was going to say, how did you make that happen? Because he got acquired through PayPal or by PayPal?
Yeah, that was another company we started that we sold to PayPal before we actually launched it. Okay. And then,
so you secretly got him acquired to PayPal, have him on their payroll, still working for you.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there, but that was
no, it's okay.
A nice little segue.
And so anyway, so back to the Tickle thing. So we then started to figure out that, we need to do this A/B testing thing. And this was sort of in the 2000s. We were like, well, let's put up a version that does one thing. And no, there was no discussion of A/B testing. There was no blogosphere. We just kind of realized that that was the logical thing to do. So we started doing a bunch of A/B testing, and then realized that you didn't just want to have entertainment virality because you couldn't predict it. So we made a machine to start to crank out lots of different assessment tests, hoping we would get lucky again. But the luck was unpredictable, and by the time you had traffic, the advertisers weren't interested, and when your traffic was going down, the advertisers were looking at your old numbers, and it just never lined up. So we said, okay, how are we going to make this more viral in a more predictable way? And we said, well, let's actually build it into the software that you should go viral, and invite your friends, and look at the test results of your friends. And turns out that people like that. So when we were growing entertainment virality, we would grow in big spikes, and then when we started making it so it was part of the product, we would grow much more steadily, and we would grow maybe 60,000 people a day. And then...
And by the way, you shouldn't gloss over that. I think this is not like, I don't know, like the popular term growth hacking, I think Sean Ellis probably put out there in 2007 or 8, I'm not exactly sure, and certainly a smart guy, but a lot of stuff you guys were doing was like 5, 6, 7 years before that. And as far as I know, really you were the first set of people that were doing A/B testing and virality testing and uploading phone books and creating spam.
Yeah.
Evil person.
Yeah, so that was the next story, which was we realized that if we could take people's email addresses out of their address books, and we could then get them to send them to their friends. So we invented the email address importer, and...
You invented spam. That's just like...
Yes, yes. And then we didn't use it for a year. We sat on it for a year because I felt like it was spam and we were going to get sued, and we would be more screwed than we were if we just weren't doing great. But then we acquired a company called Ringo by a guy named Michael Birch, who then came in and he said, well, we've got to use this thing because that thing's going to go like crazy. And I said, yeah.
Another master of spam and also
an
accomplished entrepreneur and someone who owns the battery in case you guys go have drinks later tonight or someplace.
Yeah, so Michael and Stan sort of twisted my arm, and we used the email address importer, and then we were growing about 120,000 people a day. And then we said, well, actually, instead of making our current businesses viral, we had the different idea, which was, why don't we find something that's viral and then turn it into a business? And so then we invented this thing, and that was growing at about 250,000 people a day, which was a photo sharing site with a feed. This is about a year and a half before Facebook tried a feed.
But I think you glossed over, Tickle got acquired by Monster somewhere along the way there.
So
right?
Tickle gets acquired by Monster for about 110 in 2004. And by then we had been 3 years.
So that was acquired for 110 million, not you said that so matter-of-factly.
Yes, for 110 million.
Yes.
And we had at that point been profitable for 40 straight months. And we were doing about 40 million in revenue, 6.5 of profit. But it was an unstable business.
So virality doesn't necessarily mean just like lots of growth, no money.
Doesn't have to. Doesn't have to. If you really work hard at figuring out how to make money off that traffic. And we were the 18th largest website in the world. It wasn't that we were small. You have to have a lot of traffic to actually make money from really just purely viral stuff.
But after that sort of notable win, then you started sort of doing multiple experiments at the same time?
Then we started, yeah, that's right. We started this thing called, we took Michael Birch's URL, Ringo, and we got that viral, and then we tried Happy Marriage, and we advertised that on TV, which was competing with eHarmony. Then we tried Grapevine, which is an ad network, and all this sort of stuff. And most of it was profitable, but not great. Not great businesses. In the meantime, we'd been acquired by a company called Monster, which has a two-sided network effect between employers and employees. And these people were horrible. They were bad managers, they had no product sense, they hadn't changed their website in years, and they were doing about $1 billion of revenue with about 200 million of profit, and they just did nothing. And I said to myself, my God, that's the secret. You can't have a business that you have to keep reinventing all the time like Tickle was. You've got to have a business with a network effect, because then you can just sit around and do shit. More importantly, you can sit around and think about great things you can do while you don't have to guard your back on your business, and you can actually do great things. And I'd say that people like Reid Hoffman and Mark Zuckerberg and other folks who are in charge of network effect businesses are doing great things with their lives, not just with their businesses. So that's...
I might translate as you found a company that had a relatively simple business model, but a lot of inefficiency, and you tacked on a huge customer acquisition engine on the front of that, as well as really strong retention.
They had strong retention, we had great acquisition.
Okay, fair enough.
And that's what network effect is for the retention, right? And so that was sort of the big aha for me in 2004. And so,
what do you think the retention framework is for Monster? Because I would have thought people generally just come there, find a job, and leave, and there's not much retention.
The employers are where all the revenue is.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
And so the
That's-
employers stick around and they have maybe 10% churn a year. And they have lots of salespeople that go out and talk to folks. And because they get 40,000 resumes a day coming into one side, the employers can't afford to leave because it's hard to find that many resumes. So that's how it works.
Until LinkedIn, but maybe that's still not affecting their
Yeah,
business
I think Monster still hasn't changed their website since 2002, and I think they did 770 million in revenue last year. So 770, I think I looked at the S1. Yeah.
So all you people out there thinking that innovation matters, you're full of shit, and stupid fucking boring old websites still kind of work pretty well.
Right. So that was our realization about that. So then we started a thing called Ooga Labs. We did that for 2-3 years afterwards. I had 4 kids with my wife, and then we started a thing called Ooga Labs. And this idea was, well, we had been running 7 different verticals inside of Tickle for all this time, and why don't we just do that but have them as separate businesses? And that was sort of a greenhouse idea. Now, it turns out this is a bad idea. Running a greenhouse is not really a model. It doesn't work. A lot of people have tried this. We tried it for 3 years, and what ends up happening is you invent companies for you yourself to run, which is fine, but we went in thinking it was like a model, but it's not. And so
Rocket thinks it is. I'm not sure anybody else has figured that out well.
well, that's because Rocket's copying things.
And inherently evil, but that's just
They're copying things that can be run by spreadsheet, whereas most of the stuff that we do, most of the stuff that you guys do, can only be run by you and your soul and your approach and your ideas and the way you think. Right?
That was the lamest amount of applause ever. Okay.
So that's how Rocket's doing it. They're very smart if they want to make money. So we came out with 3 companies from that. One was a gaming company. One was a enterprise software company called Jif. And the other thing was called Iron Pearl, which was actually a growth analytics tool. So think Optimizely meets Kissmetrics meets Mixpanel, all in one tool. And we built that 7 times inside of Tickle and our gaming company. And so we just were productizing that, and then that sold to PayPal. And Jif raised 55 million, and that's been going great. You know, although it's an enterprise healthcare, I don't know what the hell I'm doing that. But honestly, the way it happened was we started this gaming company, and it was horrible to run. We were 60 days from going out of money, and we ended up getting a hit game. And it did 120 million the second year after we got the hit game. And I said, this is horrible. The more we make people addicted, the more money we make. And the more the investors applaud me and say, hey, other investor, come over here. I want to introduce you to James Currier, the new opium dealer.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, how do you deal with the fact that you've been tremendously successful, but also you're sort of selling crack to
right.
to kids.
It's tough, and I didn't like it. We had people spending over $10,000 a month playing our game. And after they hit $2,000 in a month, we would call them on the phone to make sure they weren't deranged. And after a number of calls, we realized that they actually weren't deranged. They were just really lonely, or they were stuck in a bunker in Afghanistan, you know. And it was just, anyway, so we didn't like being in the business. And so we said, what can we do with this knowledge of game mechanics that would be beneficial for the world? And so the thing that came up with healthcare. And so once we started down that road and we just kept going, and now we're 5 years into it, 120 people and that sort of thing.
So, I mean, it seems like you've had probably more history than almost anybody I know at doing growth hacking, growth marketing, game mechanics, whatever you want to call it. What do you feel like you know about sort of the world and about human behavior online that other people don't know? I guess of what you're willing to share with the rest of the universe.
I think you know this stuff, but until you've lived it and seen the effect of this, you may not get it. But so I'll just maybe repeat some of the things. The first thing is that people's number one interest is themselves. And their second interest is the people they know. They are not at all interested in your product, nor are they interested in you. And so if you bring your product to them and show them how great your product is, they're going to be much less interested than if you show them how great they can be. And you show them not just what's in it for me, but you actually take their perspective. And to get things to grow fast, you generally have to do that. First of all. Second of all, a lot of people say, you know, I want this thing to happen in the world and I'm excited about that. So I want to build this product. And then once I build the product, then I'll put the words on it and then I'll market it. And that's typically the way we think. And what we do at NFX Skills is do the opposite. We say, what are the words that people will respond to? What are the words people already have in their minds that they want? Find those and then figure out what the product would be that would fulfill on those words. And then you'll see what happens. And so you reverse it. And so
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and yet I find very, very few people who think that way, which is like, you know, show me the combination of pictures and text that elicit some type of emotional reaction, and then build the product to deliver on that sort of promise.
right,
if you will.
right. And often we've got this framework, which is, you've all heard it, which is it a feature, is it a product, or is it a business? And we do the same thing. And you have to know where you are on that field. And it's the same thing with marketing. Are you starting your idea from the product you envision? Are you starting your idea from the words you're envisioning? Are you starting your product from the action you're anticipating? And you need to know where you're starting and where you're getting your energy from. Okay. I mean, the third thing that I would mention that I think a lot of people don't talk about is understand what your own motivations are. Right? Where do you get your love? Where do you get your appreciation? What are you trying to make in the world? Because there's something motivating you to do this. You guys are taking risks. You've moved away, most of you, from your homes. You're asking people to do stuff for you. You're trying to get something out of it. Figure out what that is. Because, you know, for instance, I worked with a guy who wanted to be the next Howard Schweitzer, and he wanted to be known as sort of saving humanity with his biotechnology stuff. And when he realized that that wasn't going to happen and that what he needed to do was to turn it into a business because he had raised $12 million and because he had, 28 employees, and the only way that he was going to make it into a business was by making it a business, not actually by ending up saving people. He might have 8 or 10 years later, but it wasn't a direct line. Completely lost his motivation. And then the company folded. And so understand who you are and why you're trying to get love, because whatever product you build, whatever experience you want to create, whatever language you end up using, whatever you bring to the world is going to be directly tied to who you are. And then how you think about growing it is going to be directly tied to the love you want to get. So for instance, I worked with another guy who has gone to all the fancy prep schools and all the Ivy League schools back east, and he doesn't want to build anything that looks like it's slightly spammy, because that would be an embarrassment. And he would rather fail than be anything less than erudite and like The Economist, And once you realize that and you're working with him, you say, okay, what business can we figure out that's like The Economist? And there's very, very few.
Wouldn't necessarily put viral and The Economist in the same section?
Correct. Correct.
Right.
So those are some things that we think about and we talk a lot about.
Can you tell us a little bit about what NFX is all about, and how did you kind of come up with that? How has that sort of emerged over the last year or two into what it is now?
Sure. NFX stands for Network Effects, and it goes back to the insight we had at Monster, that the biggest businesses have network effects. We've been investing and advising since 2004, since we sold the company, primarily in things like Goodreads and Flickr and Lyft and DoorDash and things that are network effect businesses, marketplaces, that sort of stuff. And having tried the greenhouse for 3 years between 2007 and 2010, we realized that wasn't going to work. And we wanted to create, something a little bit like what you've created. We'll never be as big or as grand as what you've created with 500, but the idea of having an alumni base that is connected to each other and is meaningful for each other, and that's gone through the same experience, I just find that to be something wonderful to bring to the world. And I've known Dave for a long time. I'm very proud of what he's been able to create here with you guys.
I thank you for that, but I would say that you probably still dwarf my knowledge of growth marketing and growth hacking. How do you guys select for the companies that you bring into your program? Because I think you probably might see a lot of great companies or great businesses that still wouldn't strike you as, okay, this is not going to become a network effects business. How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, so all the
says
companies
yes?
we have in the guild are network effect oriented. Not all of them start that way. So, like many accelerators or whatever, we're looking for the people. Because I think of the 17 companies in this class, 8 or 9 of them have already changed their name, and about 12 of them have already changed their business model. And that includes companies that have raised over $10 million, right? So in our last class, we had 3 companies that have raised over 20 million. So, and then we have some people who are just 2 guys, 2 people. And in this class, we have 1 company that's just 2 women. So we're looking for things that are marketplaces and networks. We're looking for things that are market networks. Right. And we're just looking for people who iterate quickly, because you have to have humility when you do these things, because none of us know. And it's literally just the speed that gets you to the aha. And as I tell people, failure is temporary, but success is forever. And you can have 100 failures, but that one success will stick with you for the next few years as your business grows, and it will stick with you for the rest of your life and your reputation.
I'd like to think that's true. I'm hoping. I keep telling my mom that's what's going on. You wrote an article for TechCrunch, I think last year?
Last May.
Last May, called Market Networks. I don't know if how many people read his article from TechCrunch on market networks? Okay, I'll make sure that we tweet it out or resend it. It's probably one of the best articles I've ever read on sort of the whole philosophy of kind of growth marketing, and particularly, defining a business that not only is viral but also makes money. I don't know if that's become a household term yet. I hope it does, but it certainly struck me as kind of the combination of, what if virality also were generating revenue, hopefully profitable as well. How do you think about the unit economics behind the business that you guys look at? Do you worry about whether they are unit economic profitable or not when you dive in and start helping them grow?
Yeah. As we help guide them to a new business model or a new market space or whatever, we're very much looking at just 3 things. We're looking at unit economics, we're looking at organic growth, and that could be viral, or it could be SEO, or it could be whatever, and we're looking at retention. Those are the only 3 metrics that matter to us. And
does that mean you don't care about paid acquisition?
We only use paid acquisition to the extent that we need to test out the products, but we encourage the teams to avoid using paid acquisition at all costs if they can avoid it. Okay. And I do so at Tickle, we were spending about $2 million a month in paid acquisition at one point. And at Wonderhill, we were paying probably $5 million a month in paid acquisition.
Is that a different answer depending on the margin? I mean, I'm assuming that if it's a thin margin, you might not have a lot of paid acquisition options, but if it's a fat margin, is paid acquisition better or okay, or not?
It's okay. I mean, typically you're going to want to get into paid acquisition only if you have a very competitive market, where somebody else has a network effect business as well. They've raised a lot of money and they're spending like crazy, and you need to keep up with them or you're just going to lose the market to them. Sometimes competition could force your hand in this regard. But in both the businesses where we were spending a lot of money on paid acquisition, I noticed a couple things. One, those businesses tend to be not very valuable. So if you have $120 million of revenue in the gaming business, if you're lucky, you're worth $100 million, right? Versus if you have $120 million at Nextdoor, you're going to be worth $4 billion.
Is your assumption that paid acquisition is a more competitive game than organic acquisition?
It just means that you're not going to have as much margin to hire more engineers and build out more product. It means that you're not going to have a very profitable business long term if you have to spend on paid acquisition. The other thing that we noticed in doing it is that paid acquisition is like an entire universe. And once you step into it, it's going to take up your whole brain because it's so complicated and it's changing so fast all the time. We just got sucked in, and I just spent all my time trying to figure out where we're. And then one time, one guy signed a bad contract, and we lost $650,000 in a 24-hour period. And of course, when did they start the campaign? They started Friday night, so I didn't find out about it until 2 o'clock on Saturday, and they have to. So it's a very dangerous tool, and most importantly, paid acquisition weakens your mind. This is my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like it just is lazy compared to organic acquisition.
It's lazy, and every, you're in the shower and you're thinking about your paid acquisition, and instead of thinking about how you're
I always think about my paid acquisition in the shower.
And you should be spending that time thinking about how you're going to change your approach to the customer so that they get so excited about it that they just tell their friends and you have more organic traffic. And so all your brain ends up going down. I remember I joined the board of Second Life, which was a cool company a few years ago. And we got there and...
That's the one with the flying penises, right?
Yeah, and gambling and child porn, but many other things as well. And we spent, 25 minutes at the board meeting talking about a $10,000 marketing budget. This is a company with 330 people. And the board with Bill Gurley and Mitch Kapoor and everybody, and we're sitting there 25 minutes talking about $10,000 of spend. And I just said, look, this is my first meeting at the board, but I got to say, can we just put that 10,000 to zero? I mean, when we would say, you know, who cares? Who the fuck cares? So it weakens your mind. And they had three people fully engaged in spending that $10,000 a month. I mean, it was, so anyway, we're not big fans of paid acquisition.
Fair enough.
But you have to use it at the beginning just to get people to your site to see if they can even use the site. So you know, if you want to spend $2,000 or $5,000 or something, that's fine. But if your whole strategy is just to buy traffic, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough because you've got everybody else trying to buy it too. When we were in the matchmaking business, we were spending $2.40 a click to get a lifetime value of $1.80. And we had to do that because and a lot of people have to do this on Google, because if you don't do that, you don't have enough people there to match up on your matchmaking site, and then your conversion rate drops. And so you're spending more money than it's worth on Google so that your other efforts can have higher conversion rates so that the whole business stays break even.
I guess I agree that I think it's a slippery slope. I always feel like, you know, paid acquisition is a strategy that works when your organic acquisition is best among your competitors, because then you can actually spend them out of business, I guess, is
yes,
one way to think about
that's true. Or your margins are better, like eHarmony did when they went on TV.
So of the companies that you think about bringing in or that you have brought in, have you been able to detect like things that are more likely to win or not more likely to win? Like are you kind of like, I know this is going to work, or some experiments work and others don't?
The thing that's most likely to work is to think through networks with revenue associated with them. So, you know, if you're trying to build
Wow, you heard that here first, folks.
No, if you know, a lot of networks like LinkedIn and Facebook didn't have any revenue associated with them until they got to massive scale. And a lot of people have tried that. And that's very difficult. But if you think about where there could be a vertical network around transactions, but there's still identity and communication that goes on, like a Poshmark, right? Those tend to be the businesses that we try to drive people to. And the other thing is, if there's transactions, then what you can do is, if you're working on a marketplace, you can go after one side of the equation or another, you know, either demand or the supply, and give them what they want just by themselves. And once they're satisfied and you have enough of them, then you can open it up to the other side of the marketplace. Otherwise, you're trying to chicken and egg it, and it just takes a lot of money or a lot of luck.
Does transaction frequency matter in that analysis?
Yeah, so we look at average sales price and frequency. So we have a boundary chart, and you either need to be frequent enough, or you need to be high priced enough and infrequent enough. It doesn't matter. Like diamonds is fine, rugs are fine, cars are fine, because the tickets are so big. Real estate, that's fine.
So how do you think about like what sort of retention if there's only like one purchase every 5 to 20 years?
You look
like
at the retention on the supply side.
Okay.
So even if you don't get retention on the demand side, you can get on the supply side or vice versa.
Got it. In that sense, then you're kind of looking at what's a continuing campaign that's going to draw leads to you, whether there's...
That's right. So Monster has retention on the demand side, whereas you know, eBay has retention on the supply side. So I'm selling, and I sell all the time on eBay. That's fine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've always struggled with travel businesses being a tough one to kind of figure out, just because it seems to be a infrequent purchase item unless it's business travel or something.
Travel is very tough, and it's made more tough by the fact that the investors have figured out that it's tough, and so it's really hard to raise money. You can raise money up to like $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, everyone gets excited, but when you go to raise the 6, it's just not there.
Yeah.
So be careful of travel.
Sorry, don't know if we have travel companies in this portfolio that I'm...
Same thing with healthcare. This is one thing I'll tell you, if any of you guys in healthcare, one of the things that I didn't anticipate when we started JIF was that there are so few investors who will invest in healthcare IT. So you have firms that invest in healthcare, and they also invest in IT, but usually those partners hate each other. And so what they, you know, and so there are very few good healthcare IT investors in the world at all, anywhere. And so if you're in healthcare, just be really careful about your fundraising because it's very difficult.
Maybe a couple of questions from the audience, since you have the growth hacking guru of all gurus in front of you, the OG of growth hacking. Where do you see, actually, let me ask you this. So right now you're doing 15 companies cohort for
Every 6 months, yeah.
NFX. And so have you thought about trying to scale that? And would you want to? Are you likely to?
We probably won't this summer. We might eventually, if I can get another partner on the ground. Because right now it's Stan's he meets with 6 or 7 companies a week, and then my partner Gigi's in Israel, and he meets with probably 12 companies a week, but it's on Skype.
Got it.
And so if I get another partner, we might scale it, but it's hard to figure out people who actually know about network effects and growth. So we might just keep it small for a while.
I guess while we're wrapping up, any particular book, stories, or articles that you find helpful for thinking on these topics?
Anything by Brian Balfour. You're having him speak.
Yeah.
Yep. Brian's great. What else? A lot of this, look, the fact that growthhackers.com exists is actually a fantastic opportunity for all of us. I find that I just don't have time to read all of it, but my guess is that I would learn a ton more if I just would take the time to learn it. I think you guys are just really lucky we live in an age where Sean has built that thing, right? I think they do a great job.
One of my favorites is a book called Spent by Jeffrey Miller, but I don't know if you have other behavioral psychology sort of books.
Oh yeah, the Art of Persuasion by Geraldini or whatever, and Positioning by Trout are great for language acquisition and position. Look, a lot of growth stuff happens because of your position, not because of your mechanic or which channel you pick, whether it's Pinterest or Instagram. It has to do with how you're positioned in the consumer's mind. You got to go all the way down to the basics. This idea that growth hacking is about the tricks and the techniques, that's very sexy, but the fact is it's a lot harder than that. You got to go down to the absolute basement. You got to go down to the empty hole in the ground of what your business is to position it and think about that. That's the foundation of growth.
Ladies and gentlemen, James Currier, give it up.